Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, and let's just talk about the future of The Witcher. I don't know about you, but CDPR and CD Projekt Red have become one of my favorite developers, especially across this generation. Even though I adore the original Witcher and The Witcher 2, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was just a monumental release. I think it's collectively one of our favorite RPGs. It's up there with Skyrim, and considering the amount of content that's in there, the sheer amount of hashtag content you can get to, it's provided literal hundreds of hours of playability and things to see, do, and experience. So, if you're CDPR, where the living hell do you even go from here? They've already got out there and talked a little bit about the fact that they don't want to do anything else with Geralt. They do sort of view The Witcher 3 as the end of his trilogy, or the end of his main saga. Because to be honest, going forward, they are exploring first-person stuff with the likes of Cyberpunk 2077, and they're way off doing that. They're going to be doing a multiplayer add-on for that in the future before they do something else with The Witcher. And it's very interesting to see that. In terms of another Witcher product, we're getting the Witcher Monster Slayer game, which is their Pokemon Go style thing, but that's just an effort that was licensed out to a completely different developer. It's not, CDPR's, it's not CDPR's mobile game. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. In terms of the continuation of The Witcher itself, there's a hell of a lot to break down. Because with the immense popularity and critical acclaim that these games have received, it does kind of seem inevitable that a fourth installment is somewhere on the horizon, even if that horizon is far, far away, according to CDPR. On that subject, CD Projekt Red president Adam Kaczynski stated that the company has already started putting ideas together for another installment. After clarifying that going forward, both Cyberpunk and The Witcher are essentially pillars of their output, the team have quote-unquote been working on a next single-player game already, creating a clear concept that awaits further development. Because honestly, if you're anything like me, the very end of The Witcher 3, especially if you played the Blood and Wine DLC, felt very final. It felt like a nice leaving off point for the character. Geralt literally looks at the camera, looks at you, the player, almost in a way to say like, I got you, we've been through this together and I got you, it's all good. And then they put a little bow on that where they give Geralt somewhere to retire. They give him a vineyard where you can sit down and relax, and whichever partner you chose to be with, whether it's Yen or Triss, or the other one who I didn't bother with, her with the red hair, you'll know who I mean, fans of that character, can come over and hang out with you. And it felt like, it's not necessarily a complete end. It's the character's not dead or old or whatever, but it felt like an ending. It felt like a sense of finality that for me was perfect. It was like, well, if Geralt wants to go and do some more monster slaying, he can. Otherwise, he's just gonna chill, get drunk, and hang out with his partner of choice. Still though, it is clear that whatever this game is, it's certainly taking the IP in a new direction, as Kaczynski also reminded us that, and I quote, "I have already said that there will be no Witcher 4. I clearly said that Witcher was a trilogy. Simultaneously, we've always emphasized that we want to create Witcher games, and the agreement with Andrzej Sapkowski, the author of the original book series, confirms our rights." As Wild Hunt closes on a very definitive note, mercifully leaving Geralt tucked up all nice and cozy, you kinda have to wonder how a further installment could continue to showcase the world of the continent and the various socio-political goings-on therein. Witcher 3 doesn't end with a world in perfect harmony though, instead making it clear that various incoming wars will definitely end up having a profound impact, regardless of what happens and who wins or loses. One thing Sapkowski's novels flesh out is that Geralt is not the cog that turns this world. He's just a Witcher, and he's caught in the middle of various things going on, just trying to make some coin, trying to get by, trying to do the right thing where he can, and therein, for me at least, lies one of the most intriguing aspects. What does a Witcher 4 or another Witcher even look like, and how the hell do they set that up in a way that's respectful and intriguing in equal measure? Nothing about this game is certain, to the point that all we really know is that it won't actually be called Witcher 4, because CDPR want to differentiate between the original trilogy and the quote-unquote new generation. However, a mixture of developer interviews, chats with Andrzej Sapkowski, and a healthy dose of fan-led hype certainly does suggest a very specific direction that this series should go in. First up, the fate of Geralt. First and foremost, the thing we have to talk about is Geralt himself. With the trilogy containing at least 3 lifetimes worth of suffering for the White Wolf, and the ending offering him a legitimate happy send-off, it's hard to see Geralt continuing in the future of the franchise. At least on the gaming side. I mean, he still has the Netflix show and could pop up in another Thronebreaker if a sequel was set after Wild Hunt. With the developers having said similar things about the character, it's clear that intentions for a further game will not feature Geralt as the playable character. The Butcher of Blaviken's era has clearly ended, but I would love to see him pop back up in more of an advisor role. Realistically, this is only a good thing. If there's one thing we've learned from The Last of Us 2, it's that love it or hate it, as a video game character you either only exist for a short while, die tragically, or otherwise stagnate through another 7 games until people start to dread seeing you. Unless you're Nintendo. We've seen Geralt go through a pretty wonderful adventure in terms of miles travelled and events seen, and tacking on further additions could make the whole thing feel far less purposeful. Geralt's gone from the ever-isolated Butcher of Blaviken to a hero, a father, or at least a father figure, and a potential long-term partner depending on your ending. It's hard to say goodbye, but it's very much for the best to let the old man finally have some rest. And maybe he gets to finally have a bath that doesn't turn out to be a nightmare with a giant crab and a pirate ship. So who could possibly usher in a new age of The Witcher? Who could possibly match the gruff but lovable White Wolf both in terms of intrigue and sheer likability? It's a high bar to meet, and to match the level of fun that we saw in the original games, we need someone who is both personally interesting and somewhat embroiled in the war and political chaos of the world itself. Capable of being a good fighter, critical thinker, and doing a spot of magic along the way just to keep things spicy. Who holds up against these fairly strenuous requirements? Well, there's only one real candidate for a whole bunch of reasons. The Reign of Siri. Though Siri had drastically different fates depending on your choices in the third game, the series still ends with her as arguably the most interesting character in terms of their future. Whether she's the prospective queen or another Witcher, on a practical level, since so much of The Witcher 3 is spent endearing you to Ciri and establishing her, having anyone else as the star of future games would feel like a bit of a waste, even if it was executed well. Because I don't know about you, but I was absolutely begging for more Ciri-based content. I mean, we barely play as her across what is a 60 to 100 hour game, but every time you do get to be in control of her, she has this really cool dash attack that can sort of lock on and blitz through a handful of different enemies all at once. I just thought that was really, really cool, extending the radius to, sort of cover various enemies and then take them all out at once. It was kind of like PS2 gem Alter Echo, and I know that only really me and Jules and like 3 other people ever played it. Basically, Ciri is a badass, and I'm sure that millions of us would like to see more of her. Not picking Ciri means CDPR are unable to reference a lot of the source material, given that the books increasingly focus around Geralt and Ciri. The games and books aren't canonically linked, but many quests in CDPR's titles are very much lifted from the source. And to be honest, this whole cherry-picking approach has worked wonders. Though it's been made very clear by Andrzej Sapkowski that the gaming side of things is only an adaptation of the world and its characters, ignoring 6 beautifully written books with ample lore for inspiration seems to be looking a gift roach in the mouth. Since we don't actually get to see very much of Ciri in The Witcher 3, especially if you don't fully count flashbacks, which is roughly 90% of our time spent with her, this incredibly likable character was relegated to the background, and that pales in comparison to a full Ciri-based game where she'd be allowed to carve her own destiny. Ciri's story is crucial to the future of this beloved fantasy world, so it makes perfect sense to explore this fascinating period through one of its key players. The only downside is clashing with some of Witcher 3's endings, or at least canonizing one over the other. Still though, attempting to cover all bases, make Ciri begin to take the throne whilst balancing her approach to being a Witcher could be the best of both worlds. Geralt tried desperately to stay out of politics and still found himself embroiled in political turmoil, so paving the way for thematic crossovers and crises of prioritization depending on how you play could be ideal. If Geralt's heir is cursed with the same problem as himself, it handily carries over a major identifying aspect of Witcher scriptwriting. On the technical side, CDPR have even already created Ciri as a playable character, since you do play as her for sections of the game, alongside some very exciting boss fights. Now, these parts weren't universally loved, though personally I was a big fan, but this was only because it felt kinda clunky going from Geralt, who you'd likely spent a good 50 hours with, to then picking up a completely different fighting style. The knock-on effect of this confusion though only helps going forward. Many of us, even those who struggled with Ciri's advanced abilities, simply wanted more time to flesh out her moveset and understand what was on offer. Give us an entire skill tree for her teleportation moves, especially considering that this is a post-Witcher 3 Ciri who's unbelievably powerful after helping defeat the Wild Hunt. Hopefully this should knit together those two sides of the fandom, because honestly, a evolution of the Witcher's combat with teleportation, distance closing, and a general sense of style, whilst maintaining the finishes and the brutal acrobatics of what went before, I would love that, and I'm pretty sure you would too. Finally, the biggest reason that Ciri should continue the Witcher franchise is that she's the character that Geralt himself completely believes in. She's also the character that we as a fan base champion, and the one that we saw grow up in front of us across that whole game. It's clear at the end of Wild Hunt that Geralt believes in Ciri, and knows that she can succeed at whatever she puts her heart and mind into. Providing you didn't mollycoddle Ciri and get a worse ending, at the end of the day Geralt has already signed off on Cirilla, Fiona, Ellen, Rhiannon carrying the torch of Witcherdom forward, both in a meta sense and in-game. All those rumours and rumblings of a create your own Witcher for the future, this idea of just injecting our own custom character into the mythos, that could be fine, but I just think there's so much more that they could do if they focus on Ciri and flesh her out with an overall sense of purpose. Throughout The Witcher 3, we watched Ciri grow up and to some degree raised her as our advice and actions influenced the type of person she became. With this groundwork already done, carrying our saves over to the next game to boot, seeing Ciri blossom in the span of her own new trilogy would honour the original games whilst also allowing the franchise to grow in new and wonderful directions. At least that's what I would do. I know it's kind of simple, but it's also staring CDPR in the face so much that they hopefully have to run with it. Let me know what you think down in the comments below about the future of the Witcher series. Do you want to see a Witcher 4 or something else entirely? Would you put a whole new set of characters in here or try and continue with some of what went before? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com and I'll catch you soon.